Have you felt it? The way things slowly change, so quietly, so subtly that at first you don't even notice. The phone that used to ring so often now sits in silence. The invitations that once felt effortless now seem like a thing of the past. Conversations that once flowed with warmth and ease now feel different, shorter, more distant. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing. People get busy. But as the days turn into weeks, the silence lingers a little longer than it used to. You reach out more, trying to keep the connections alive, but something feels off, like you're the only one making the effort. And then the thought creeps in, am I being left behind? Did I do something wrong? Or have I simply become someone people no longer think to call? It's a painful feeling. No one tells you that one of the hardest parts of growing older isn't just the changes in your body, it's the feeling of becoming invisible. But before you start believing this is just how life is now, let me tell you something, this isn't where your story ends. The love, the laughter, the closeness you once had? It's not gone. It's simply waiting for the right moment to return. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover today. Small, unnoticed habits that quietly push people away, and more importantly, simple, powerful shifts that will bring them back. Because you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. And no matter what life has made you feel, you are not alone in this. So if this speaks to you, take a second to subscribe to Elderly Wisdom Story, because here we don't just talk about aging. We talk about truly living. Now let's begin. Have you ever noticed how the energy of a conversation lingers even after the words have faded? Some people leave you feeling lighter, uplifted, as if just being in their presence adds something good to your day. And then there are others, people you care about, people you once enjoyed being around, who, over time, start to feel like a weight on your shoulders. It's not that you don't love them, but their presence drains you more than it fills you. And without realizing it, you start reaching out less, keeping conversations shorter, putting just a little more distance between you. Now, imagine being on the other side of that. Imagine realizing that the people you love, the ones you used to talk to so effortlessly, are slowly pulling away from you. Not because they don't care, but because something has shifted in the way they feel when they're around you. Not your words, not your love for them, but the energy you bring into the room. It happens so subtly that we rarely see it in ourselves. We don't wake up one day and decide to be negative. We just carry the weight of our experiences, our frustrations, our disappointments, and over time, they start spilling into our conversations. We talk more about our aches and pains, about how things used to be better, about what's wrong with the world today. And even though those feelings are real, completely valid, if they become the foundation of our interactions, people start to associate being around us with a feeling of heaviness. Not because they don't love us, but because they, too, are carrying burdens of their own. And sometimes, without realizing it, they start choosing spaces that feel lighter. But here's the truth, just as our energy can shift in one direction, it can shift back again. And it doesn't take pretending to be happy or forcing yourself to be someone you're not. It's about balance. It's about making sure that for every moment of frustration, there's also a moment of appreciation. That for every negative thought, there's an effort to recognize something good. A simple way to do this is by following what I call the 3-2-1 rule. For every one complaint or negative thought, balance it with 3 positive or neutral ones. Instead of leading with what hurts, lead with what's good. Instead of saying, no one calls me anymore, try, I had a lovely walk this morning and the air felt so crisp. Instead of, the world isn't what it used to be, say, I saw a beautiful act of kindness today that reminded me there's still good out there. And if you ever feel like there's nothing positive to say, try keeping a joy journal. Every day, write down something small that made you smile. The warmth of the sun on your skin, the taste of your favorite meal, the simple pleasure of a good night's sleep. These little moments may not seem like much, but they add up. They remind you, and the people around you, that joy still exists, that life is still full of beautiful things worth noticing. Because at the end of the day, people don't just remember what you say. They remember how they feel when they're around you. And if you can bring light into a conversation, if you can make people leave feeling just a little better than when they arrived, they won't just return out of obligation. They'll come back because they want to. There was a time when conversations felt effortless, when words flowed naturally, when laughter was easy, when simply sitting with someone felt like enough. But now something is different. The calls don't last as long. The responses feel shorter. And sometimes when you're in the middle of telling a story, you notice it, the subtle glance at a phone, the slight shift in their seat, the unspoken signal that they're ready to move on. First, you try to ignore it. People are busy. But as it happens again and again, a quiet thought settles in. Are they losing interest? Do I talk too much? Have I become someone they don't enjoy speaking to anymore? It's a painful realization, but here's something most people don't see. It's not about you. It's about how people feel when they're in a conversation with you. And often, without realizing it, we make conversations feel heavier than we intend. Not because we mean to, but because we care. We've lived long enough to recognize mistakes before they happen, to see patterns others can't, to know when someone is about to walk into trouble. And because we love them, we want to help. But what feels like guidance to us can feel like correction to them. No one enjoys feeling like they're being lectured, even when the advice is good. The moment someone feels judged, even subtly, even with the best of intentions, they start to pull away. Not in an obvious, confrontational way, but gradually, instinctively. They talk less, they share less, and before long, conversations become surface-level exchanges instead of meaningful moments. And suddenly, the closeness that once felt so natural is replaced by a quiet, growing distance. But here's the shift that can change everything. Make space for the other person to lead. Instead of starting conversations with advice, start with curiosity. Before offering guidance, pause and ask, would you like my thoughts on this? Or can I share something I've learned? You'd be surprised how much more openly people listen when they feel like they have a choice. And if they say no, that's okay too. Sometimes people don't need answers, they just need someone who is willing to listen. One of the most powerful ways to invite people back into deeper conversations is by embracing what I call the curious grandparent approach. Instead of filling the silence with instructions, let the other person guide the conversation. Instead of saying, you really should be saving more money, try, what's something exciting you're working toward right now? Instead of, that's not how we did things in my day, try, what do you love most about the way things are today? When people feel heard instead of corrected, they open up. They share more. They stay longer. And suddenly, the conversations that once felt rushed start to stretch out again. The phone calls last a little longer. The distance that once felt inevitable begins to close. Because in the end, people don't return to conversations where they feel instructed. They return to conversations where they feel valued. And when you become someone who makes people feel that way, they won't just call out of obligation. They'll call because they want to. The world isn't what it used to be. You feel it in the way people talk, in the things they value, in the pace of everyday life. The conversations that once felt familiar now seem sprinkled with words that don't quite make sense, references that slip past you, and habits that feel foreign. You see younger people glued to their screens, typing away in a language of abbreviations, emojis, and rapid-fire messages, and you wonder, how did we get here? It's easy to shake your head and say, back in my day, things were different. But what most people don't realize is that every time we hold too tightly to the past, we risk making the present feel like something we can no longer be a part of. It's not that the people in your life don't love you, it's that they may not know how to include you in a world that's constantly evolving. And if we're not careful, we can accidentally make them feel like their world will never measure up to ours. A grandmother once found herself feeling this exact way. She adored her grandchildren, but every time they visited, she felt like she was watching their lives from the outside. They texted instead of calling, spoke in phrases that made no sense, and seemed more engaged with their phones than with her. She wanted to be close to them, but no matter how much she tried, she felt like a guest in their world. One they loved, but one they didn't always know how to bring in. One day, instead of pulling away, she chose to lean in. She asked her grandson to teach her how to text the way he did. At first, he laughed, thinking she was joking. But when he saw that she truly wanted to learn, something shifted. He sat beside her, showing her how to use emojis, how to send a GIF, how to keep up with their quick, playful messages. What had once been a source of frustration became a moment of connection. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. Staying relevant isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to learn. There's nothing wrong with cherishing the past. It holds wisdom, memories, and moments that shaped who we are. But when we live only in the past, we risk making those around us feel like their present doesn't matter. Every time we say, things were better back then, it may seem harmless, but to younger generations it can feel like their world, the one they are actively building, will never be good enough in our eyes. And when people feel dismissed, they pull away. Not because they don't love us, but because no one wants to feel like their experiences don't count. But here's the beautiful thing. Curiosity is a bridge. And you don't need to change who you are to cross it. You just need to show interest. Try what I call the one new thing challenge. Once a month, pick one small thing to explore from the modern world, not to critique it, but simply to understand it. Watch a popular TV show that your grandkids enjoy, even if it's not your taste. Ask someone younger to explain a phrase you don't recognize. Let them teach you how to use an app they love. Not because you have to become part of their world, but because showing interest tells them you want to be part of their lives. People are naturally drawn to those who make them feel valued. And nothing makes someone feel more valued than when you take the time to understand their world. When you choose curiosity over dismissal, you don't just stay relevant, you stay connected. And connection at any age is what truly keeps relationships alive. There was a time when connection felt effortless, when conversations didn't need to be scheduled, when visits happened naturally, when laughter filled the spaces between words without anyone having to think about it. But now there's hesitation. A silence that lingers longer than it used to. A growing awareness that the phone isn't ringing as often. A quiet thought that settles deep in the heart, why don't they reach out anymore? At first, you brush it off. They're busy. But then the days stretch into weeks and the silence begins to feel heavier. You catch yourself staring at the phone, debating whether to call, wondering if they even thought about you today. And then another thought creeps in, oh, should I have to be the one to reach out first? Shouldn't they want to call me? It's a painful place to be, caught between longing and pride, between wanting connection and fearing rejection. But here's something we don't often stop to consider. Maybe they're thinking the same thing. Maybe they too are wondering why we haven't reached out. Maybe, without realizing it, both sides are waiting, both sides are hesitating, and in that hesitation, distance quietly grows. Relationships are never just about love, they are about effort. And effort, when it feels one-sided, can begin to fade. No one wants to feel like an obligation. If every call is met with, "It's about time you called," instead of, "It's so good to hear your voice," people start to pull away. Not because they don't care, but because no one wants to feel like they are failing someone they love. But here's the truth, distance isn't closed by keeping score. It's closed by taking the first step. Call first. Send the message. Not because it's your turn, but because connection is worth more than pride. And when you do, make the conversation feel like a moment of warmth, not a reminder of absence. Instead of saying, "You never visit me anymore," say, "I love the times we spend together." Instead of, "Why don't you call?" say, "It makes my day when I hear your voice." Small shifts in language create big shifts in relationships. And if you want to deepen that connection even more, try something simple. Send a voice message instead of a text. There's something powerful about hearing the voice of someone you love. It carries warmth, emotion, a sense of presence that words on a screen never can. And when people associate your presence with comfort instead of guilt, they won't just return the call. They'll start calling first. Because at the end of the day, relationships aren't about keeping track of who reached out last. They are about making people feel wanted, not just needed. And when you become the kind of person whose presence feels like home, people don't drift away. They draw closer, not out of obligation, but because they truly want to be there. The past has a way of calling to us, doesn't it? A familiar melody drifts through the air, and suddenly you're back in a moment you hadn't thought about in years. A photograph tucked away in an old drawer, a scent that lingers for just a second too long. It only takes a spark, and the memories flood back. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like the past was simpler, richer, better. But as comforting as nostalgia can be, it carries a quiet danger, the risk of holding on so tightly that we forget to reach forward. The more we say, "Things were better back then," the more we risk making the people around us feel like their present, the life they're building, the experiences they cherish will never quite measure up. And slowly, without realizing it, Conversations begin to feel like a history lesson instead of a shared moment. The past is important, it shaped us, it gave us wisdom, but so is today. And one of the simplest ways to stay truly connected is to show interest in the present moments of the people we love. Instead of leading with, "Back in my day, we did things differently," try asking, "What's something exciting you're looking forward to?" Instead of reminiscing about an old adventure, invite them to share a recent one. "Tell me about the best part of your week." People light up when they feel like their world matters. And when you give them space to share, they'll naturally want to include you in more of it. A beautiful way to bridge the past and the present is through a then and now tradition. Pull out an old photograph of yourself, pair it with a recent one, and share the stories behind them with family and friends. Let them see the person you were, but also the person you are. Because the past is precious, but so is today. And when you embrace both, you don't just keep memories alive, you keep relationships alive too. The past holds so much beauty. Moments we treasure, relationships we've built, love that has lasted a lifetime. But as much as the past connects us, the present needs space to breathe. Just as a garden flourishes when given sunlight and room to grow, relationships thrive when there is a balance between closeness and respect for one another's time. It's natural to want to reach out whenever a thought crosses your mind, to pick up the phone the moment you miss someone, to stop by because you're in the neighborhood. After all, isn't that what connection is, being there for each other? But without realizing it, these small, well-intended gestures can sometimes feel overwhelming to the people we love. A call at the wrong time, a surprise visit when they're in the middle of something. What once felt effortless may now feel intrusive. And when this happens too often, people don't always say it out loud. Instead, they step back. They hesitate before picking up the phone. They answer messages with fewer words. Not because they don't care, but because they feel like they need space and don't know how to ask for it. It's never easy to feel distance growing in a relationship, but here's the truth. Space isn't the enemy of connection. Space allows relationships to breathe. It gives people the freedom to come back to you on their own, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. And the simplest way to create that balance is through small shifts in the way we communicate. Before calling, ask, "Is now a good time to talk?" Before stopping by, send a quick message, "I'd love to see you. When would be a good time?" These small gestures don't make you less important in their lives. They make it easier for them to welcome you in. And when you reach out, give them time to respond. A delayed reply doesn't mean you've been forgotten. It simply means life is happening. Instead of worrying, trust that when the moment is right, they'll answer. Because when relationships are built on respect and understanding, people don't need to create distance. They come closer on their own, in their own time, because they want to, not because they have to. There's a delicate balance in relationships, the need for closeness and the need for space. When we learn to respect that space, something remarkable happens. Instead of people pulling away, they start to lean in. Instead of feeling like we have to chase connection, we become someone they want to be around. But once that space is created, how do we fill it again? How do we rebuild warmth where distance has settled? It starts with energy. People don't always remember the details of a conversation, but they always remember how they felt in your presence. If every interaction feels heavy, if every call is filled with complaints, people may start to associate you with exhaustion rather than comfort. But the opposite is also true. A lighthearted story, a moment of gratitude, a simple "I love talking to you." These small things can shift the entire dynamic of a relationship. You don't have to pretend life is perfect. You just have to remind people that being around you brings something good into their day. Listening is a gift we don't give often enough. Too often, we focus on what we want to say next rather than truly hearing the person in front of us. But when people feel heard, when they feel like their thoughts, struggles, and joys matter, they are drawn closer. Ask questions that invite them to open up. Let them tell their stories, share their excitement, vent their frustrations. And when they do, listen, not to respond, not to correct, but to simply understand. Curiosity is the bridge between generations, between perspectives, between worlds. Too often, relationships fade because people feel like they no longer have common ground. But common ground is built, not found. It's built in the moments where you ask, tell me about something you love. It's built in the effort to learn a new phrase, to watch a show they enjoy, to let them introduce you to something unfamiliar. When people see that you care about their world, they naturally want to invite you into it. Reaching out shouldn't feel like a burden or a test. It's easy to think, why should I be the one to always call first? But connection isn't about keeping score. It's about making people feel wanted. If you think of someone, let them know. Not with expectation, not with resentment, just with warmth. Because when you reach out without pressure, people respond more freely. And over time, that openness becomes mutual. The past holds beautiful memories, but relationships are built in the present. It's never too late to create new joyful moments. Suggest a simple coffee outing, a walk in the park, or even a shared hobby. It doesn't have to be extravagant. What matters is the time spent together, the reminder that your presence is not just a link to the past, but a meaningful part of their now. Respecting personal space isn't about distance, it's about trust. The people in your life have their own routines, their own responsibilities, their own quiet moments. When you give them the space to come to you rather than pulling them in, you create a relationship that feels safe, not demanding. And when people feel safe with you, they don't just stay, they choose to return. Again and again. Not because they have to, but because they want to. The truth about relationships is that they are never truly lost, only waiting to be nurtured again. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how much distance has grown, there is always a path back to connection. It doesn't take grand gestures or dramatic changes. It takes small, intentional moments. A kind word instead of a complaint. A question instead of an assumption. A moment of patience instead of frustration. These are the choices that rebuild bridges, that remind people why they love being around you, that turn silence into conversation and distance into closeness. One of the greatest lessons in life is that connection isn't something you chase, it's something you create. It begins with being the kind of person others want to be around. Someone who listens, who brings warmth, who respects boundaries but still reaches out with love. And when you focus on being that person, you won't have to wonder why people have pulled away. You'll find that slowly, naturally, they start coming back. So take a deep breath and let go of any fear that it's too late. It never is. You have the power right now to take one small step toward deeper relationships. Maybe that step is a phone call, a message, or a simple shift in the way you approach a conversation. Whatever it is, take it today. And if this message spoke to you, leave a comment below with one change you plan to make. Your story matters, your wisdom matters, and this is a space where we grow together. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because at Elderly Wisdom Story, we're not just talking about aging. We're talking about truly living.